532, you're assigned to a captain. Did you copy the 505?
Start me a card for a parking problem. 911, what's your emergency?
Yeah, my next door neighbor broke into my house and stole my drugs.
911, what?
A fun, unique podcast taking you behind the badge. Unbelievable stories exploring the day in the life of a first responder. 911 is made possible by Carlos Bail Bonding and Eric Buchanan and Associates, fighting for those that have been denied disability, life, long-term care, and health benefits nationwide. Now, here's your host, DeMarlon Dean.
Welcome to 911 What? Halloween edition. Yeah, we're going to be talking to some officers and talking about some of those crazy calls. Maybe even a little more crazy than usual or a little more eerie than usual. You know what I'm talking about. Some of those calls that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And I can't think of a better way to start this off by bringing back my friend Nate Sylvester. The last time we talked to Nate Sylvester, he was with the Bellevue Police Department, and 2 days later after we did our show, he was no longer with the Bellevue Police Department. But that's okay, because Nate's doing all right. Nate's got a brand new book out called Never Off Duty. I actually have a copy of the book myself. This is an unsolicited plug, but I'm reading the book now, and so far it is great. It actually puts things in terms that everybody can understand how difficult it is to be a police officer today and the challenges and the scrutiny that you fall under today. So I'd encourage anybody listening today to pick up that book, Never Off Duty by Nate Sylvester. He also has a podcast himself now, and you can find it on YouTube. Nate Sylvester's podcast. Just look for it on YouTube, and he has lots of great guests. But I'm not going to belabor this any longer. We're just going to turn it right over to Nate and have him tell you one of the craziest calls, weirdest calls, most shocking calls that he's been on. So it's crazy. It's always crazy. Being a police officer, being a first responder, you're just in situations that should seem normal, but you always know something is just not right.
Well, after you think you've seen it all, you're like, okay, there couldn't possibly be anything new after this, right? But there's always something that takes you by surprise. So long time ago, several years ago, I got dispatched to a call with a few other officers because the call came in that there was a gentleman there who was trying to harm himself with power tools. And as we show up, he had taken a circular saw, right, like a skill saw, and sawed off his left hand. Because he sawed off his left hand, and because he said that his hand was possessed or that it was cursed or something, and the only way he could get rid of the curse was to saw it off. So he saws off his hand, and he had dipped the stump into some flour because obviously he was bleeding and he didn't know what else to do besides dip it in flour and hope that the flour would coagulate with the blood and stop the bleeding. And he's carrying his hand in his other hand, and he comes out into the driveway and he's bleeding everywhere and there's blood all over his house. And we're just like, oh my God, like, what is this guy on? And he did not have any drugs on board. And I don't know how he was able to because it's not like he was screaming in pain. He was just, he was kind of sort of like ranting incoherently, about demonic possession and, curses and all this stuff. So obviously there was some mental health stuff going on.
Right.
Which is fascinating to me because if your mind can sort of disconnect from reality that severely that you don't feel the pain of sawing your own hand off.
Right.
That's nuts. And so, yeah, that was a very, obviously we called paramedics. They transported him to the hospital. I don't know whether or not they were able to reattach his hand and save it, or I don't know if they can do that. But I just remember them telling me later that like he didn't have anything in his system. I said, man, what? That's insane.
That is crazy.
Yes, that was one of the craziest calls I've been on as far as like a mayhem situation,
Wow. In episode 13, we talked with Mark Easley, and he talks about a lady, similar situation. It was a mental health issue. He described it as she was 80 pounds carrying her cash register. Didn't weigh anything. She was 80 pounds, 80 years old, but thought he was an alien there to kill her and her husband. And he said he had to fight for his life. She cut his vest off with a big knife. Yeah. And he said, man, I wasn't losing the fight, but I wasn't far ahead or something like that. But I mean, literally took a tumble down the steps and everything to try to subdue this 80-year-old woman. But yeah, mental health is no joke. Drugs, mental health, people don't have a full grasp of how dangerous some of those folks can be. But Nate, thank you so much, man. I hope you have a great, safe Halloween holiday, and
you too,
we'll
brother.
get together soon, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm down anytime.
All right. Thank you so much, man.
You're welcome.
So now we have Adam Oxendine with the Richland County Sheriff's Department, and he's going to share a little story with us about maybe a time he and his dog were in a building that may have had some other guests in there that they didn't see.
So when I was a canine handler, we used to do some training. Now, years ago, probably the worst thing that the government could have done was gotten rid of mental health facilities. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother political side of things, and I really don't want to delve into it. I'll just say that. So one of the areas that we used to train in was an old mental health facility. It was an old mental health hospital in downtown Columbia. It's called Bull Street Mental Health Facility. Mm-hmm. And there was a building there called the Williams Building. And so what we would do is we would use the Williams Building, and we would use the chapel right next door to it to do our building search, to do our tactical entries with the dog, to do our call outs, this, that, and the other. Well, one afternoon, this happened broad daylight. One afternoon, we're sitting down there. We did a little bit of training. We did it in the lower half of the building. And my sergeant at the time, who was very, very, very superstitious, decided that he was going to grow a set, if you will, and go further upstairs. So we're sitting outside and we're eating lunch, and I look up, all the windows on the upstairs are closed. And I look up and I see the curtains that were left up there. Now, this building has been closed down for years, but I see the curtains up there start to move a little bit, and it's only in one window. Mm-hmm. So I looked at my sergeant and I said, "You really think this is a good idea?" And he was like, "You're just saying that." I told him what I saw, and you're just saying that to spook me out. I mean, this guy would jump at a rubber snake. So, anyways, I said, all right, fine, whatever. I'm with you. I'm following your lead. So we go upstairs. At the time I was going through, a decoy certification. So we're walking upstairs, we clear all the rooms. Cause there were homeless people that stayed in there, but we never saw anything that went further up than the first floor, than the ground floor. Mm-hmm. So we're walking through, we're making sure everything's clear, doing our due diligence on that aspect. And we get our decoy set up. It wasn't me this time, it was somebody else. We get our decoy set up in a room. And so we bring the first dog up. And we get to the threshold of the hallway. Handler gives us call outs. And I was standing right next to the handler because it was my shift partner at the time. So usually when we train, we try to train shift partner with shift partner, because we're not going to send somebody random off the street in with another canine handler when we can put two canine handlers together who understand how the dog operates and how to work around the dog when the dog's doing its job. Just mainly because rookies get bit. So I'm standing there with my partner, and we're at the threshold of the hallway, and he's giving his call outs. And during the second call out, now this is July, during the second call out, a cold breeze comes rushing by us. And it was real quick. And the dog's head he was looking left, and the dog's head snapped right real hard. And all of a sudden, the dog just takes it without any, command or anything. The dog takes off running down the right side of the hallway and will not come back to us. other than having the leash in our hand, the dog's not coming back. And I look at my sergeant, and he's got this perplexed look on his face, like, what the hell is the dog doing? And he was like, yeah, the decoy's not that way. The decoy's the other way. Unless, a breeze may have blew the scent past him. But again, dogs are trained to go to the source of the odor, whether it's human or narcotics or whatever it may be. And we heard a loud bang on the far right-hand side of the building. Well, there was nobody.
Which is the direction that the dog was looking.
Right. And the direction the breeze went. And the decoy is to the left.
Getting chills.
And the decoy is to the left. And about that time, my sergeant said, yep, time to unass this place. And he calls down the hallway. He says, Taylor, come on. So the guy who was the decoy comes out of the room. And the dog doesn't ever see him because he's down the other way. And I don't think they're tearing that building down now. I don't think we ever went back after that. We never trained after that. About a week later, I was on night shift. I rode down there just to kind of find that corner to hide in, and you could hear the same banging going on. Yeah. So,
wow. And they say dogs have like an extra sense to sense those kind of
they
things.
do. I mean, you look at you've got dogs who are there's service dogs who do the PTSD, the diabetes, and all that other stuff. Yeah, they've got that extra hair on the back of their neck, if you will, to sense something when something isn't right. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for sharing. This is Adam Oxidine, and he will be featured on an upcoming episode of the 911 What podcast, so be sure to check it out. Thank you very much. Next, for our special Halloween edition of 911 What, we have former officer Dana Looper, and actually you'll hear more about her story on an upcoming podcast. But Dana, thank you so much. How are you doing today?
Hi, I'm good.
You are very, very welcome, and I'm thanking you, and I'm very glad that you're here. But a friend of mine, I'll go ahead and give a shout out to Mr. John Collins, which I hope to have him on the show one day. He tagged me in a post on Facebook with you sharing a kind of a freaky, scary little story situation that you ran into as a police officer. And I wanted you to share that with our listeners for this special Halloween edition of 911 What?
Facebook, recently I shared a story back from like 2006, 2007 when I worked as a deputy at the Alberta County Sheriff's Department. It was late, and I guess it was, December, November, super cold out. I would say it was like, 12 o'clock at night. Me and a couple other guys were working our shift, and there wasn't anything going on. It was cold out. No one was moving around. And my sergeant had got into a pursuit. So we start, easing towards his way. He was trying to make a traffic stop. They wouldn't pull over. He finally gets the car to pull over, and he gets one of the passengers and secures that person in his car, but the other one took off on foot. So since that one was secure, me and one of the other deputies began, searching the area to see if we could locate this person who was out on foot. Again, super cold out, dark, so we thought, okay, they're not going to get far. A little ways from that traffic stop, I come across a church, and the front door is standing wide open. It was, eerie anyways, just, like, oh my gosh, he's in here. He has to be in here. He's getting shelter. It's super cold. So, I put my spotlight on the door. I hold my position, as we're supposed to do, and wait on the other deputy to get there so we can search the place. So he gets there within, a few minutes because, like I said, we were super close anyways. And we get out of the car. We let dispatch know where we're at. We're going through the church, and you know how a church is. You've got all these rows of pews.
Right.
We're walking through, shining our lights, looking down through each one, looking underneath. We're not seeing anybody. We keep moving towards the back of the church. We get to the very back, and I would call this kind of like the kitchen meal prep area, I guess. And there's all these tall pantry doors. And so we're opening up each one, making sure, he's not hiding. And then I come across the last one, and the door handle starts shaking. Like, someone is freaking out. The cops have got me. It's over. I'm scared to death. They're going to make me come out. And I'm like, And I look over at the other deputy. I'm like, we've got him. He's in here. So he keeps his gun on the position, and I'm giving verbal commands, doing everything textbook, from our training. And I'm getting a little resistance on the door. And so I open it, and there's nothing there. So we both look at each other. I know. We both look at each other, and the blood is just gone from our face because we knew he was in there. In my soul, I knew he was in there because of the way that, the shaking of the door, the holding on to it, not, giving us that resistance, and he wasn't there. So me and the other officer were just like, look, we'll take that as a sign to get out of here. Whatever's in here, we're not supposed to be in here. We're out.
Oh, man.
So we left. We told, the sergeant, what had happened. Nobody believed us, of course. They thought we were cowards. But I don't think that the suspect was in there. I think something else was in there. And to this day, I still think that.
So there's nowhere it could have gone in there, like another door, a hole, or nothing?
No. And there was an event, so, everybody could be like, oh, it was just, the negative pressure, the air, there was a vent. No, there was absolutely no reason why that door acted like that. It was acting like someone was behind it. So, now I think back to that, and I'm like, what, was there a basement where there was something, really demonic, gnarly going on, and we weren't supposed to...
Oh, man. Wow. Well, my motto is better you than me, because I don't want to be in that situation. Well, Dana, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And that's a perfect story for our Halloween edition of 911. So thank you so much. And I look forward to your episode that'll be coming out soon. Do you or someone that you know have disability insurance? I mean, the insurance that you buy through your employer in case you have an injury or an illness that prevents you from doing your job. And if you do have that insurance, good for you. Hopefully you'll never have to use it. But know this, if you do have an injury or illness and it prevents you from doing your job and you file that claim, the insurance company is going to do everything they can to try to deny that claim. And if you find yourself in that position, you need to call Eric Buchanan and Associates. That's right, Eric Buchanan and Associates, and put them to work for you. They will go to bat and fight to get you the benefits that you've paid for and that you deserve. You can call them at 877-634-2506. Again, that's 877-634-2506. Or you can find them online at buchanandisability.com. That's buchanandisability.com. Be sure and call those guys, Eric Buchanan and Associates. You won't be disappointed. Now, if you've listened to my podcast much at all, you'll know that one of the things I try to impress upon you is if you find your situation being arrested by the police, do not fight. Just go ahead and take the ride and then call Carlos Bail Bonding to get you out. You're not going to win on the side of the road. So go ahead, take the ride, get bailed out, and go fight your day in court. Call Carlos Bail Bonding at 423-475-6383. Again, that's 423-475-6383. Or you can look them up online and see all the amazing things his clients have been saying about him at bailbondsmanchattanooga.com. That's bailbondsmanchattanooga.com. Carlos Bail Bonding. Don't fight on the side of the road. Take your ride, call Carlos, and let him get you out. Joining me now is retired New York Police Department officer Vic Ferrari. And if that name sounds familiar, that's because he was my guest on episode 11 of 911 What. That was my special 9/11 series that I did. And one of the funny things he shared is he had to fight for his pants. Somebody almost stole his pants while he was going to the crapper. But so if you haven't checked out episode 11, go back and check that out. But Vic, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm good. How are yourself?
I am doing very well. I know you've got a couple of stories for us. One dealing with some shenanigans on Halloween, and then another one that's just kind of creepy, eerie. So go ahead. I'll just let you tell your story, sir.
Well, in the early 90s, I was a cop up in the Bronx, and like on television every day before you went out on patrol, I was doing 4 to 12s. They'd have roll call, and the sergeant or the lieutenant that was turning out the platoon would explain to the troops what's going on, what to look for, any intelligence that came in. So in the early 90s, you had packs of kids that it was called wilding. And you get a group of boys, and they would run around and beat people, rob people, attack people, and it was getting more and more brazen. Well, in New York City, you had there's an island between Manhattan and Queens called Roosevelt Island. They actually filmed the movie Nighthawks there, with Sylvester Stallone and Rutger Hauer were battling it out over hostages over Roosevelt Island. So anyway, there was a large homeless camp there, and these kids would go to this homeless camp, and they set some homeless people on fire. I mean, the attacks were getting more and more brazen. But the final attack was, and they were telling us at roll call, they said, be careful with these kids. They're carrying knives. As a homeless guy, these kids cut off a homeless guy's ear last night. So an old timer sitting next to me turns to me and goes, I hope that motherfucker doesn't wear glasses. So NYPD cops have a gallows humor.
Yes, and you have to have a crazy humor. I mean, the guy that got his ear cut off, I'm sure he didn't think it was funny at all. But oh my goodness, that's crazy. And then, and I think you said you also have a story that would just basically make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. What's that about?
So when I was in the New York City Police Academy in the mid '80s, they make a point of taking the rookies or the recruits to the morgue, because you're going to see death, when you're out on patrol. So they make a point of bringing you to the morgue. So the day before we go to the morgue, my police academy instructor, very to the point kind of guy, says, listen, tomorrow we're going to the morgue. Not the MEs, not the doctors, but there's people that work there. They're ghouls. He goes, they're hourly paid employees. They're there to assist and move bodies around. He says, but they're ghouls. He goes, no one else in the world would want this job. He goes, be careful with the ghouls. They'll slam trays down. They'll pick up body parts. He goes, to scare the rookies. He goes, avoid the ghouls. I said, okay. So then the following day, myself and 30 other recruits go down to the morgue. And we went to Bellevue Hospital. So in New York City, you have suspicious deaths where the ME's office performs autopsies. And then you also have a large homeless population, or people just die without their credentials. So literally, they're doing 30, 40 autopsies a day down there. So it's in the basement of Bellevue Hospital, and we walk in, and it looked like a Jiffy Lube. If you've ever been to like a Jiffy Lube or a Mavis Tire Center, there's bays, okay? Yeah. So you've got the metal slabs, the metal tables, and when we walked in, there was at least 5 autopsies going on at once.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, and like a tire center, what they use to do an autopsy is, if you've ever seen that whizzer tool that cuts muffler pipe.
Yes.
So when they're doing an autopsy, they cut the back of your head, the back of your skull, from ear to ear, and like a movie, they pull your face off to get to your brain.
Yes.
And we're sitting there like just in shock, because none of us had seen anything before. We're 21 years old. We have no life experience. And the ghouls are taking the brain out. They're looking at it. They're showing it to us like a Price is Right model. And suspended over each bay is like a produce scale, like you used to see in the old produce places. And they're weighing organs. I mean, they're just taking the brain, 3.5 pounds, and then the ghoul makes a joke, oh, well, he's got a tiny brain. He must have been an idiot, Then what they do, they take that same whizzer tool, and they cut your chest open like they're doing open heart surgery. They pop your rib cage open, and same thing. They're taking pictures. They're pulling out body parts. They're weighing it. So we were watching actually a pregnant woman that died of an overdose, and they took the fetus out with the umbilical cord and weighed it in the scale. I mean, it was the bizarrest thing I had ever seen. But in the next bay over, there was a guy that was hogtied and shot numerous times, and they're taking off the duct tape. And there's like this old-time cigar-chomping detective hanging over the ME's shoulder, and he goes, what do you think? And the ME goes, suspicious suicide. With a guy that's been shot multiple times, that's been hogtied.
Yes. Yeah, kind of hard to shoot yourself when you've been hogtied.
It was a 3-ring circus in there. And one of the things I remember when you go to the ME's office is one of the instructors gave us Vicks at menthol, and you unscrew the cap and you take a little bit of it and you put it underneath your nose to mask the smell.
Right.
A couple of guys and girls passed out. I mean, it was too much for them. But the funny thing is, so when we're done with this tour of the morgue, we get into this large freight elevator, probably about 20 of us. We get in, And just before the doors close, a guy in a white coat walks in that was making jokes. And as the door closes, like a child, I point to the guy in front of our police academy instructor. I go, "Officer, is that is that a ghoul?" Which the whole, I mean, it broke the tension. Everybody started laughing except the ghoul.
Yeah.
And the police academy instructor gave me a smack in the head and called me a wise ass. So that's my Halloween hair-raising story of what I could give you about Halloween.
Yeah, there's nothing like hanging out in the medical examiner's office, that's for sure. So Vic, before I let you go, I know you have several books. Why don't you tell us about your books and where we can find them?
Sure. My latest book, and I'll hold it up, is called NYPD Law and Disorder.
All right.
It's about the things that have gone wrong in my NYPD career. As you brought up, sitting on the toilet and having someone trying to steal my gun belt. Grand Theft Auto, the NYPD's auto crime division. It's everything you wanted to know about the stolen car industry, but are afraid to ask. Gangs, car thieves mindset, how to protect your car from thieves. I've got the NYPD's Flying Circus, Cops, Crime, and Chaos, and NYPD Through the Looking Glass, stories from inside America's largest police department.
Very nice. And if I'm not mistaken, you can get those on Amazon, correct?
Yes, sir. You can get all my books on Amazon for $10 or $2.99 ebook download.
Vic, thank you so much for joining me today, sir. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really
Hope you
appreciate it.
have a happy Halloween.
You too.
Now, for the finale of the 911 Halloween show, I brought in the big guns. Well, technically, I brought in the big tomahawk, and those of you that are local will know what I'm talking about when I introduce this final guest. But I dropped in on the Chattanooga Drive-In Show, which is a Chattanooga-centric podcast here, and it's really good. You should check those guys out, and it features legendary storyteller, my man, Jeff Stiles, as well as Jen Lambert and Russell the Love Muscle and Brian Stone. And just check this out. Jeff has one of the creepiest ghost stories you'll ever hear. I couldn't think of a better way than to end my podcast than coming to the master storyteller. And I know you've got some pretty freaky stories that you can share. So that's what I'm here for.
I do. And the good thing about a couple of mine is the fact that they were witnessed by so many other people that it can't just be my, story versus, your imagination.
Right.
We will pick the one that seems to get most people's attention, and it's the one at Hales Bar Marina. We have mentioned it already. Now, if you go to, where are these pictures actually located? Now,
they're on our Facebook page.
Jen took pictures of pictures, and they turned out pretty darn well.
Yeah.
And if you go to our Facebook page, the Chattanooga Drive-In Show Facebook page, you will see they're slightly out of order, 3 black and white pictures, because I was shooting black and white film in my old 35 millimeter Minolta camera with the big tripod and the telephoto lens. I meant to be shooting artsy shots at this old marina. They had just established floating cabins. This was the new recreational attraction for that part of the world. Now, Hales Bar Marina has never been in operation. It was one of TVA's biggest failures. It is located on the old stomping, hunting, and burial grounds of the Creek, the Muskogee, the pre-Mississippian Indians, but most famously, Chief Dragging Canoe, the man who did not surrender when he was fighting on the side of the British during the Revolutionary War. The British surrendered, Cornwallis surrendered, he did not, and continued to harry settlers until they finally sent John Sevier and Andrew Jackson down here and whipped his ass and killed all his people.
Wow.
And he cursed the land. He cursed it and salted it, and said that nothing good will ever happen here again, this land be accursed. And sure enough, from the very construction, the first day they started constructing that big, huge, monstrous marina and dam and working lock, it was death after death after death after death. I can't even describe to you how many people had fallen into the walls and were entombed in this thing. They had a huge, massive explosion where they had a cave on the other side of the river, and they were mining things that they needed for the construction, and somebody hit a vein of vapor and killed 31 men.
Oh.
The explosion, and many of them ran into the river on fire and were pulled down into a huge whirlpool that still exists there. Then when they finally got it built and they flooded the area, they flooded 2 or 3 cemeteries, didn't bother to move the bodies or even the headstones. You can go out there right now. We can get in my kayak. I'll loan you Rebecca's.
All right.
And I can take you to a floating graveyard with headstones sticking out of the murky water. They didn't do this very well. Now, the interesting part about the story is I didn't know any of this when I went.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. We got a couple of certificates for a free stay at the floating cabins.
Mm-hmm. I remember.
And Rebecca was having to work. So she came and she stayed with me Sunday night and got up the next day and went to work, and I had the rest of the week off. Okay, we didn't know anything about any ghosts. We didn't know anything about any hauntedness. We didn't know anything about the history of the place. But I know this. This is what, and you're going to have to forgive me. I'm going to do a little bit of show and tell with DeMarlin, but go look at the pictures on Facebook page. First of all, that's the way the day looked when we arrived. A very stormy, stormy day. There's the old Riverbend main stage, the Coca-Cola stage sitting out there. At one point, I paddled my kayak out to it on this Monday, all right, the day that the storm came, and I was holding on to it and realized it was going to beat me to death.
Mm-hmm.
I could not, and I knew a storm was coming. Paul Barris said a major storm front was coming through. So I said, I need to get the hell away from here. So this is what ended up happening, and I will tell you the story in order. I barely got back to the floating cabins. I was tired. I was fighting this chop like I was in heavy ocean waters, and the wind was beginning to howl. And I literally had to roll a couple of times as though I was in a whitewater river because it was just blowing me over, and I had to get up. I pulled my boat up on the dock, opened the door into my floating cabin. I saw Paul Barris said, "Hales Bar, you've got about 20 seconds to seek shelter," and the power went off. And I took off running down this bucking, floating platform. And there was a woman down there at the end of it screaming, "Come on, come on, come on, come on," because everybody else had disappeared. They'd rounded them up. I was the idiot in the boat.
Duh.
Right? Going, why is the idiot out there in the water? And so I get there, and hail starts falling horizontally, diagonally, at such a rate and such a size and such a speed, it hurt badly. And I barely made this huge cavernous space where they stored the boats. They would put the boats on the little kind of pontoon things like a forklift and lift them up and put them up.
Mm-hmm.
Barely made it up in there. And I looked up and I saw a funnel cloud come across the mountain, and I saw a chopped line of water that I knew was wind and hail being pushed about 60 miles an hour. And this is what it looked like when I first saw it. Look at the funnel cloud reaching down, and that white line is all the way across the lake at the base of that mountain.
Mm-hmm.
All right? 2 seconds later, that's how fast it got there. I literally took the shot, advanced it, took another shot, and at that moment, I want you to notice something. In this picture right here, do you see something a little odd right there?
Yeah, I see that.
See
Looks
that
like a
ghostly image, almost kind of like a devil horn or skeleton sort of laid out there?
It's something.
That is exactly when I was standing there looking at this storm, looking at this tornado, suddenly appeared to me, just as I can see Jen right now. I can describe what Jen's hair looks like. I can describe what Jen is wearing. I am not looking at her. All I am using is my peripheral vision, just like I am with you. I can describe you perfectly. I know you're there. And I said the words, oh my God, this is a hell of a storm, isn't it? And I took the third picture, which is this picture right here, where you see everything completely blanked out now. The storm has hit and everything is wiped out. You can't see anything in the background because nothing exists in the background. It all got picked up and thrown out of the lake and over into the road. So it was a tornado that touched down, became a water spout, just completely ruined the marina. And during this time frame, I'm standing there in this open space, and I'm looking at this big, huge, earth-moving piece of equipment, a big caterpillar, and I said, you know, if things really start going south, I'm going to grab this caterpillar and I'm going to go wherever it goes. If it goes 100,000 feet in the air, I'm going 100,000 feet in the air. If it stays on the floor, I'm staying on the floor. I am going to become one with this earth mover tire. And I hung onto my camera and hugged that tire for all I was worth. And I started looking around for the guy that had stepped up next to me. Uh-huh. And he never had said anything. When I said that, well, that's one hell of a storm, isn't it? And then I took that third picture and I looked over there and he was gone. I said, isn't it? And I kind of was looking around going, where the hell did he go so fast? I mean, that was weird. And it didn't strike me until later, after the storm was over. And you know how it's like after a storm's over, everybody's in kind of a daze, and they're walking around, the power's off, and the floating cabins were floating away. They had been pulled off their mooring lines. People were trying to catch boats that were drifting. I was doing the best I could to help them out. And the lady that had been standing there, and there had been a ton of people out there earlier, all dressed in a weird uniform. They were dressed in this kind of one-piece black uniform, like they were some sort of paramilitary force, and they had TV cameras. And I found out later that they were one of the ghost hunting crews. They were actually out there filming a story on Hale's Bar, the haunted marina, and the ghosts within it. I didn't know. I just knew they were jerks. And TV people tend to be jerks anyway, right? Yeah. And so I literally walked up to this lady. I said, you know what? I think I saw a ghost. She goes, well, I mean, we do have them. I said, you do? She goes, yeah, that's what these people were doing out here. They're shooting a ghost story. I went, no kidding. She said, what did you see? And I said, a man, right when the tornado hit, suddenly appeared next to me. And he was a smaller man. He was very dark-skinned. He had a little Ricky Ricardo mustache, a little, Boston Blackie mustache. And his hair was slicked back that looked like he had, Brill cream in it, or he was a Dapper Dan man. Mm-hmm. Not an unhandsome fella, but the weird thing was he had on a very fancy vest that would have been popular anywhere from like the cowboy days, the 1880s, through the 1920s. Very, very fancy embroidered vest over a puffy sleeved shirt. He did not look like he was from this era. I kind of made the immediate assumption that he was part of probably some kind of historical walk you through the thing as a tourist, thing. So anyway, I just thought the guy knew the place better than I did. He stepped out and went, damn, it's a tornado, and went and hid. And so I told the lady, I think I saw a ghost. She goes, oh, yeah, you definitely saw a ghost. And she told me his name.
Oh, my goodness.
And of all the ghosts that are there, the people that are buried in the walls, who they still hear them knocking and crying, the Native Americans who they still hear wailing, the men that they still hear screaming as they run into the whirlpool. And by the way, the whirlpool is in the building. If I'm lying, I'm dying. If you walk in that same front of the building, that huge big doorway I walked into, and walked to the very back, there's an opening in the floor that is nothing but Tennessee River in a whirling vortex. And for whatever reason, they built it that way so they could have access to be able to drop stuff in and it would pop out on the other side and they wouldn't have to bring it around. But it is eerie.
It sounds eerie.
It has never operated, and when you look at some of the other pictures and you just look at the place, and you just know there's something looking back out of those windows at you. And I didn't tell anybody about this story other than Rebecca for about 2 weeks because I was so convinced that everybody was going to tell me I was crazy. You know the crew I used to work with.
Oh, yeah.
They would be merciless, right? They would just give me hell forever and ever and ever. And so I didn't tell. Finally, somebody broke the ice on the air and said they knew I was out there. And did I see anything unusual? And I spilled the story. And she sent a picture through this early thing we had called the internet of a man on horseback. And it was the guy I saw.
Oh,
and
that just gave me chills.
He was
Man,
the
me too.
foreman that fell into the wet concrete.
Wow.
Oh my
He was the
goodness.
foreman on site. He was on horseback, and he was sitting there, and it was the dude. It was the dude that I saw standing next to me. So the tornado itself was exciting enough, and then afterwards, when everything was settled down, I realized I had seen a ghost, and then found out about the whole history.
Yeah.
So I was not jaded on the way in at all.
Yeah, that's the best way to be.
So it's, but I'll say this: the what they call the catacombs. And we talked about the number of people who believe that ghosts can hurt you. The guy that runs the place is an Army Ranger who went in his first time into the catacombs. He got fairly deep into them, did not feel comfortable, and something grabbed him by his dog tags so hard that it left a permanent mark across his neck and a stringency mark, like somebody had tried to garrote him. I mean, literally hurt him, cut off his airflow. And people who go back there get scratched and bitten and pushed and shoved. And I would not go in. I walked in.
I won't go.
Rebecca was behind me. I had my camera. I said, "Let's go." She goes, "Hell no. I'm not going inside that place." So I said, "Oh, come on. I'll get some good pictures. You go on back then, scaredy cat." I bet I didn't take 20 steps in, turn around and said, nah, I'll do this another time.
Nah,
and
I won't get 20
and that was
steps
it.
in.
That
It
was
ain't
still
happening.
before I knew about anything. So if you're into it, if you want to go have at it. But I don't want any part of whatever's inside that thing.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that story.
It's a big one. The pictures themselves are fairly self-explanatory, and what gets me is that one little shot. It doesn't show up on any of the negatives. It doesn't show up on any other prints, but that would be exactly the time I was asking that ghost, boy, this is a hell of a storm, isn't it? It's about to kick our ass. And you get this weird, ghostly apparition right here at that time.
There's something there.
There's something there, no doubt about it. And that is mountains looking at each other for today. Thank you, DeMarlon,
Thank you. I appreciate that.
very much. Now, when does your show air?
Well, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I had a lot of fun reaching out to these folks and doing this for you. If you did enjoy it, make sure you tell your friends, share the episode, and, help us grow this thing. But I do appreciate you listening, and I appreciate your support. And if you have any other ideas, just shoot them to me at 91what.podcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to 91 What? We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have comments or suggestions, please email us at 911.podcast@gmail.com. And thanks to Carlos Bail Bonding and Eric Buchanan and Associates for making this episode possible.